You're locked in to the hottest station on the planet.
Resistance is futile. The revolution has begun.
You're listening to Rebelpreneur Radio, helping you break the rules and build the business you need for the life you want. And now, broadcasting his pirate signal
from somewhere beyond the status quo,
here's your host, best-selling author, marketing and media strategist, Ralph Brogden.
Hello and welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio. It's the show that helps you build the business you need so you can live the life you want. I'm Ralph Brogden. Today's guest, more than anyone I know, really and truly epitomizes the whole idea behind Rebelpreneur. A rebel entrepreneur who isn't afraid to break the rules, to take big risks, and enjoy big rewards along the way as he builds the business he needs to live the life that he wants. And I'm really pleased to introduce JJ French, who started Twisted Sister, the internationally renowned heavy metal band, nearly 50 years ago, and has amassed 37 gold and platinum albums as a musician, manager, producer, and executive producer, while having performed over 9,000 shows in 40 countries, selling 20 million records around the world. JJ is a rock star, but he also shines as a business leader who developed Twisted Sister into a global brand with multiple revenue streams and built it into one of the most licensed heavy metal bands in history. He has written with Steve Farber a new bizoir, Twisted Business, offering his insights, tried and true tips about resiliency, reinvention, turning roadblocks into pathways, authentic leadership, and innovation so that anyone can bring these principles and apply them to their life and to their business. JJ, welcome to Rebelpreneur Radio.
Ralph, thank you for having me. What a very nice intro. I appreciate it very much. And I think after hearing what you just said, I need to take ibuprofen. Really? We did all that? Oh, man. You know, one thing you didn't say, and that is there's been a lot of successes. There was also monumental failures. Okay?
Yeah.
And we can talk about that because it was the monumental failures that probably led to the greatest learning curve in the business.
That's encouraging because I think a lot of people, when they hear those numbers, they are kind of intimidated that, well, I'll never achieve that level of success, or it's just beyond me. But it's not beyond them because it wasn't beyond you. And that story is interesting. That's the subject of your book. It's part memoir. It's part business strategy. And so it's really exciting for me personally because as we were talking before we got started, I first came into contact with Twisted Sister when I was maybe 13 or 14 years old, watching this new television program or television channel that had just come out called Music Television, MTV. And here are these crazy looking guys. And there was an immediate attraction, connection. And quite frankly, ever since I found out I would be speaking with you today, I have not been able to get that song out of my mind. That music video and the monologue, I had memorized that from the time of 14 years old. I could still recite it today. But what an impact globally. And what is really fascinating to me is you're not slowing down. You're shifting gears and really going into even more levels of success, impact, and influence as you take the lessons you learn and you put them into your podcast, into your motivational speaking, into this new book. So your story is amazing. Let's go back before Twisted Sister and talk about you growing up in the Upper West Side of Manhattan in the 60s. And I'm told that you were a notorious drug dealer. Is that true?
Well, I grew up in the turbulent 60s. I was born in 1952. I was 15 when Sgt. Pepper came out. So you kind of have to look at that. It was the epicenter of the hippie culture. I'm a New York City kid and, a street kid. And my parents didn't have money to buy a guitar, so I made the leap from Boy Scouts selling Boy Scout cookies to firecrackers to selling weed, and I became a pretty big weed dealer, which means I was 50 years ahead of my time, Ralph, because everyone's selling weed now, apparently. I was telling you back then you should get into it. Nobody was paying attention. So I started dealing because it was fast money, and my parents couldn't afford a guitar. I tell the story in the book about my father. My first deal ever was actually in the Boy Scouts. I sold Boy Scout cookies. Believe it or not, Boy Scouts sold cookies. I know you think the Girl Scouts only did, but Boy Scouts did. And I'd sold 110 boxes of cookies when I was 13. When I was 14, they threw me out for having long hair. And then the Boy Scout master called me and he said, hey, you sold cookies for us last year and we'd like you to sell cookies again. And I said, let me get this straight. You threw me out. Yeah. And you want me to sell cookies? And my father said to me, you know that guitar you want, right? That guitar that costs $25 that I don't have? Put the phone down. And I put the phone down. He said to me, tell the guys you want 10 cents a box commission to sell, and you'll make enough money. Now, I'll make sure everybody I know buys cookies. So my father worked on 47th Street. When New York City, if you know New York City, you know Times Square, you know the Damon Runyon, fast talking, New York hustlers. That's the world I grew up in. So my father dragged me down to 47th Street. He made every jeweler buy cookies. I sold 242 boxes.
Wow.
I made $24.20. My father threw in the 80 cents, the big spender. And I bought my first guitar.
Wow.
And then shortly after that, went into firecrackers and then got into weed. And I did it for the reasons of just selling, of making money to buy guitars and going to concerts. My mother was a political consultant. And my parents were very politically involved in the anti-war activism, pro-civil rights world. This is the world that I grew up in. My bunkmate in one of my camps was Ben Chaney, whose brother James Chaney was one of the 3 civil rights workers killed in Mississippi, Mississippi burning case. My mother worked for Constance Baker Motley, the first black woman to ever be elected to the New York State Senate. She was her campaign manager. My mother convinced James Meredith, the first black to enter the University of Mississippi under the aegis of the National Guard brought in by John Kennedy, to campaign for Constance Baker Motley because she was his attorney in the Supreme Court fight to get him into the University of Mississippi. So at the age of 11, we picked him up down at his hotel and brought him into Harlem and had him campaign for Constance Baker Motley. So obviously it's a unique childhood.
Yeah.
All right. And then the New York City thing was great. And the hippie scene was big. Try to explain it to a young person that on any given weekend, you could go see Led Zeppelin or Jimi Hendrix or the Grateful Dead and Rod Stewart and Jeff Beck and Jethro Tull for $3 at the Fillmore. 4 times. You could see $12. You saw four concerts. Try to explain that to somebody.
Yeah. Try
to explain to that same person. If you couldn't afford the $3, you could see him in Central Park in the summer for $1. That's how much it cost, $1. So you had thousands of groups playing every weekend. You didn't think anything of it. Could always see, you want to see Cream? Yeah, they're playing tomorrow. You want to see Jethro Tull? They're playing tomorrow. You want to see Jeff Beck? He's playing tomorrow. Led Zeppelin's coming back next month. And the Dead were here every month. And the Allman Brothers were here every month. So I grew up in that culture. And I spent 5 years as a drug dealer and a drug user and had a drug habit. And then eventually the whole hippie thing blew up. And I go into detail in the book. We kind of get through it quickly because it's important the lessons of the book were important, but I needed for people to understand how I became what I became, hence a bizoir, a business book and a memoir. I literally woke up one day and said, you know what, this whole drug scene sucks. I hate it. And I rebelled against it and went completely straight, which is very weird for most people to think that you go cold turkey. I did. My best friend and my girlfriend were junkies. People were dying around me from either being murdered in drug deals or just taking too many drugs, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I witnessed all of it. And I woke up one morning and said, you know what? This is something I can't do. I need to pursue my rock and roll dreams. I need to join a band. Of course, as my mother would say if she was alive, well, that was a great choice, John. You went from being a drug addict and a drug dealer totally straight, but you joined a transvestite rock band. So I don't know which is worse, my son the drug dealer or my son the transvestite. But I immediately kind of got rid of the Grateful Dead Allman Brothers thing, got into a David Bowie thing, flipped out, and again, we go into it in the book, and joined a rock band, which was Twisted Sister in December of 72. That was when I auditioned and was the last original member picked for the band. It was called Silver Star. I told the band at the rehearsal the name sucked. My quote was 2 Quaaludes and no one will remember the name of the band. So the singer, Michael, got drunk after and came back from a bar and thought of the name Twisted Sister, which was a brilliant name, sadly for Michael. And what we talk about in the book, of course, because alcohol ruined the first 6 versions of Twisted Sister, of which the band that made it was the 11th version. Alcohol destroyed that band. And I go into detail about what happened with that. So I go through the whole drug scene, come back from the drug scene, enter a band that's full of raging alcoholics. I don't drink. I never drank. I didn't understand drinking. I've only had 6 beers in my life, and I can't drink a beer. It makes me ill, and I don't drink. So here's the problem, Ralph. Why do people get into heavy metal and rock bands? You get into party, Mm-hmm. You want to get high, you want to party, and I get it. But I developed this theory like 3 years in that drugs and alcohol have no place in the business of rock and roll.
Yeah, I mean, how did you manage to pull that off in that environment? That's an interesting question. First of all, your character has to be very strong. And I do mean that. You have to go, that's just not me. That's just like, some people can gamble and some people don't gamble. I don't gamble. I think gambling's stupid. I'll never gamble. It just makes no sense to me. I don't drink because it's never made any sense to me. I don't do any drugs that doesn't make any sense to me. I needed to find guys who thought exactly that way. So we went through band member after band member after band member got fired or quit because they were addicted to various drugs and alcohol. And eventually I said, that's enough. I got to find straight guys. And when D auditioned for the band, I said to him, let me ask you a question, man. Do you drink or do drugs? He goes, I hate drinking. I hate drugs. I went, you're my guy. And I thought, well, he may be an idiot or he can be an asshole because, singers can be, whatever. But I said, he's straight. And that's what I need. I need a guy who's willing to work hard. And of course, D is so many things. He's also a spectacular singer, spectacular songwriter, but D's was adamantly anti-drug and alcohol. And then we got Mendoza on bass, and he was adamantly anti-drug and alcohol. And I mean adamant. This wasn't based on a religious decision. It was just based on this fact. You can't work as hard as we work to make it and have to recover from being drunk the night before. It's not going to work. And when you get the it was a business decision as much as a personal decision.
And, we would hire replacement drummers, and we'd go, look, man, here's the deal. You got to know this. We don't really approve of drug and alcohol use. And here's the response you get. You either get, are you crazy? Are you serious? What are you, like a bunch of Jehovah's Witnesses or something? Well, I can't join your band, which is preferable. Or you get the guys who say, oh, that's cool, I don't do it. And they do it and they lie to you. Only to show up stoned at some point and embarrass the band and have to be fired. So when people say to me, how do you do that and not get high? Man, I don't really know how to put it. We travel the world, the biggest bands in the world. You're just not into it. You're not into it. Like there's just nothing about it that lures you into it, unless, of course, you want to be lured into it. Me, D, and Mark were like, man, don't even, I was offered Coke one time in the 5 years that we were headlining and playing, at the peak of the MTV years. Now, you would think everybody offers you drugs every day, right? You would think everybody offers you parties. We were antisocial as a band. We never hung out with other bands. We didn't choose to. We were older than most of them at the time. And the word was out. You guys are straight, don't bother. And one day a roadie from a well-known band offered me Coke, and I said, did you get the memo? I said, I could put your head through a wall for this shit. And he said, I didn't know. And I said, well, now you know. So now don't ever bother me again.
Wow.
And he never bothered me again. And that was the end of it. So that was truly a single moment. One time. Now, here's the weird part about being straight. Our record label hated the fact that we talked about the fact that we didn't do drugs and alcohol.
Oh, it kind of messed up the image or the mystique or something, right?
Yeah. They said, that's really not good for your image. And I said, really? They said, yeah, man, because like you can't do that because everybody thinks you guys are crazy because you guys are crazy. That's the shtick. I said, well, yeah, but we don't do it. He goes, yeah, but don't tell people you don't do it. And I said, you know how weird this is? I said, in politics, if you're a politician and you're found in a hotel room with cocaine and an underage girl, you're done, right? You're done. And if you're a famous athlete and you're caught in a hotel with an underage girl with cocaine, you're done. But if you're a rock musician found in a hotel with an underage girl and cocaine, you know what they do? They write songs about you. And they give you a record deal. And they go, wow, man, you're the coolest guy on the planet, man. I want to be you. I want to be you. Because we deal in a world of stunted emotional development. So because it took us so long to make it, we were already in our mid-30s and we had no tolerance for it. So people may be stunned to know that is the truth about it. As crazy as the band was professionally, it was all just a show.
Yeah, I did not know that. Now, I want to read a quote from your book and talk about this quote, because this really jumped out at me more than anything else. You said, at some point on my journey, I understood that I wasn't going to be one of the world's great guitar players. I was really good, but not world class, and I was okay with that. Instead, I was going to channel my talent toward being a rock star, which is a very different intention and outcome. Tell me about that strategy.
Well, rock stars in general aren't musicians, and musicians in general aren't rock stars. Musicians, a person that really takes their music seriously and devotes themselves to practicing endlessly because, they want to become, maybe they think they want to become a rock star. But the job of a rock star is a wholly different set of requirements and skill sets. And it has to do with understanding your own PR, understanding stagecraft, understanding the art of portraying a celebrity. And that's a very different skill set. So at a certain point, my playing got to this point where I said, I'm good enough for this. I can do this. I need to concentrate on developing the JJ French thing, the sunglasses and the whole image. And also, while that was going on, I was also managing the band because I had to take over because of bad management. And it took so much out of me between the creation of this JJ French character and the management skills that one must attain to be successful. It took me away from becoming a great player. So at one point, maybe I wanted to be a great player, like when I was 16, 17, 18. By the time I was 27, 28, I said, you know what? I'm not going to be Yngwie Malmsteen. It's just not going to happen. I'm not going to be Eddie Van Halen. Those guys are great at what they do, but that's what they do. They do that, and that's what they're known for. I'm known for many other things, and it was a choice I made to step away from the spotlight of being a, quote, great musician. So many people who enjoy my playing say to me, I sell myself short, and it's very nice that they say it. I think I'm a journeyman player. Let me put that in perspective. There's a lot of professional ball players out there who have a batting average of 250, and they're great, and they're pros. They show up every day. They do their job. They got 20-year careers. Are they hitting 333? No. But they're just 250 players, 275 players. So I was a 250 player, meaning complete pro, do my job, but I had a life and did other things and developed it. So I came to terms with it early on. What's that quote? Your man has to know his limitation. Yeah. And my limitations were that in order to be good at other things, I had to take a step back on the guitar part. So I love playing guitar. I have a lot of them and enjoy playing it, but that stopped being the focus.
See, I think that is so profound, because I think a lot of people in business, relating this now to the audience who is listening to this, whatever business you're in, you don't have to be world class to be successful. You don't have to be in the top 1% to be successful. Decide who and what you're going to be and play to your strengths, and don't try to be your imitation of someone else. That, to me, what you just said there was so tremendous, what you said in the book, that you were okay with that. And a lot of people, a lot of musicians, artists would have spent all of their time trying to compete at a world-class level and would have missed the opportunity to really grow the business. You understood that this was a business and not just about artistry or it is performance, but you're looking at it from a completely different view than someone who is really interested in the artistic expression. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's fair to say it was a business of partnership. I don't write, I don't sing. I need a great singer and a writer. I can't make it on my own. I knew that I couldn't do it. It's why Dee's in the band. I don't play bass. I don't play drums. You need great people. Ahmet Ertegun, the chairman of Atlantic Records, once said to me, I asked Ahmed, I said, how did you develop Atlantic Records? How do you develop a label that goes from Coltrane, and Sonny Rollins to, to Iron Butterfly, Led Zeppelin, Crosby, Stills, Nash, AC/DC, Rat, Twisted? How do you do that? Do you know that music? And he said, no. I had to hire people. If I had a record label with just artists I'd love, I'd be broke. He said, I couldn't do it. I got to bring people in who I trust, whose ears I trust. And then he said to me this phrase, and I will never forget this phrase. You want to walk away with a great phrase? He goes, success is easier if you don't mind who gets the credit.
Yeah.
And I never minded that D got the credit because, if D didn't write those songs, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. Okay?
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
If we're not going to take it, and I Want to Rock did not become as worldwide famous and gigantic as they have become, to be the most licensed songs in the history of heavy metal, or among the most licensed songs, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. I wouldn't be writing a book that anybody cared to read. It's because the band had enormous worldwide success that I kind of always thought, well, that'll be a framework for other things.
Yeah.
And so I always looked at it like I love Twisted Sister. Twisted Sister has been in my life for nearly 50 years.
It's really hard to believe that you guys are that old.
Yeah, well, I am. I mean, D came in 76, but I started, late 72, and I'll be 70 next year. So, but to be fair, okay, so let's look at that. If you would have, let's look at the bands that came out basically in 72, 73. Judas Priest, AC/DC, Scorpions, Alice Cooper. If you would have asked any of those bands in 1973, how long do you think you were going to last as a band? Here's the answer you would have gotten. 5 years, maybe 10, because the Beatles had lasted 10 from 60 to 70. And they were the longest running band at the time. So here we are 50 years later. How big is Kiss? Huge. How big is AC/DC? Huge. How big is Judas Priest? Huge. How big is Scorpions? Huge. How big is Wizards? Are huge. Alice Cooper? Huge. We had no idea 50 years ago that we could sustain this, but the ability to sustain and to change and to reinvent became the core story of my book. Because what I say in the book is we were turned down more times than a bedsheet and came back more times than Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers. And the ability to recover and come back. There is no business as volatile as the entertainment business. And here's the reason why I can say that. You could have the biggest movie in the world and the number one record, and the first question someone says to you, so what's your next project?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Can we talk about the thing that's number one today?
Yeah.
And do you mind if I enjoy this for a couple of months? You're asking. So it's always, what have you done for me lately? So we came from a volatile business, which only further allowed me to develop the skills to recover and be able to talk to other people about how to recover. And the book goes into depth about the twisted method of reinvention.
That really sounds exciting and so important as we are presently trying to figure out how to reinvent ourselves, reposition, pivot, change, adapt to the world situation with the pandemic and all of the uncertainty that's in the world. But going back to 1984, we're not going to take it. That's the hit that it's the one that I remember, the one I referenced as a teenager sitting there watching MTV and these strange, scary looking guys. And, but what an impact that had on me personally. Tell us about how that song came about and how MTV really helped your sales to explode. A new medium, a new channel, a new venue. Did you see that potential? Did you really appreciate at the time where that was going to take you?
Well, first of all, by the time that song became a hit, we'd already been together 12 years. So it wasn't like we were new to this, So we had already been through many, many, many rejections and ups and downs. But D his songwriting got better and better and better. And he used to write anthems. So his first big anthem was "I'll Never Grow Up Now." That was his first big anthem of this kind of music. And then the second big anthem was "Bad Boys of Rock and Roll," and then "Shoot 'Em Down." So when we got to "Stay Hungry," "I Am, I'm Me," which didn't make it a hit here, but it was a hit in Europe and got us, basically, it was the record that led the way for us when we got our first record deal in England. So we already knew that, and we had laid the groundwork for success. But 83 was an important year because Quiet Riot had a #1 album, Mental Health. And it was the first heavy metal band with a #1 record. So everything was primed. But MTV was in its very early stages. And even though we had a video for You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, it got minor play here and it got some play over in Europe. So what happened was, going into 84, we already established the fact that we could sell records. And the record label was impressed. And I met with the record company president in December of 83 rather. And he said to me the following. He said, I was wrong about you guys. I miscalculated. I didn't know what I had. You guys sold 100,000 records with no promotion. Next year, I'm going to make you the biggest band on earth. And he says this to me. And you would think that I'd be jumping up and down, but I'm a cynical guy from New York, and I don't believe a word he's saying to me, you know? So I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, you know this thing called MTV? I go, yeah. He goes, you know who owns it? I said, no. He goes, we do. I said, who's we? He goes, we are. Warner Music owns MTV in a partnership with American Express, which most people don't even know.
Yeah.
Okay?
I didn't know
Most
that.
people don't know. But at that point, they were owned by American Express and Warner Music. So we said, if you give me the right video, I'll make you the biggest band in the world. So I walked out of that meeting like, yeah, sure. And someone from the label said, oh, how was the meeting? And I said, well, the president just told me this. And they said, oh, that's amazing news. I said, no, it's not. He's full of crap. No, he's not going to do that. Don't impress me with this. I'm not. Anyway, we go into the studio. We do the songs. And we do We're Not Going to Take It. And, we're all like, okay, it's another D anthem. I Want to Rock, another D anthem. There's songs I like on the album. Those aren't my favorite songs on the album. Don't Let Me Down, I love. SMF, I love. I love those songs. Burn in Hell, I love. I don't particularly love these others, but that doesn't mean I don't respect what they turned out to be, gigantic hits. But when the concept came for the video, getting Mark Metcalf from Animal House, who, by the way, I see Mark periodically at autograph signings, and I always say to him, Mark, does a day go by where someone doesn't say, would you please say, what do you want to do with it? And he says, oh, yeah, it happens all the time. I love it. I don't get sick of it. So anyway, we did the video. And when I saw the video, what I thought to myself was, oh, my God, this is going to explode. And it did. It did. So that was it. And it just, then the Juggernaut took off. I mean, it was kind of like, I felt like I was in an SST with no windshield, like, but, I was 33, 34, mature, already been through everything. And so we took it in stride. We had already played to massive crowds, because the band was such a big band in the bars that we already had regularly playing to 5,000 people. And we'd also done shows for 20,000 people before the record deal, which most people don't fathom or can't understand. We already had that training. So we just took the training that we learned in the bars, the discipline and the excellence, which I get into in the book, because the book takes you through the twisted method of reinvention, TWISTED. The last two letters are excellence and discipline. The band was extremely disciplined, and our striving for excellence was an overriding concern. The cliche that says that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Right. I absolutely do not agree with that as a performer. Doing something over and over and over again gets you better, but in such small increments that you may not even realize. But it's almost, and I talk about this, it's the boredom of excellence that makes the great ones great. Meaning, you want to become a great skater? You get up at 5 a.m. and do it for 6 hours a day. How many people are going to do that, Ralph? Not too many. Yeah. Right? Not too many.
Anybody can.
How many people are going to get up at 5 a.m. and become a great skier? Get up at 5 a.m. become a great swimmer. Get up at 5 a.m. and practice, or work as a band 6 nights a week or 5 nights a week and rehearse on the 6th day. Most people don't. That's the deal. Most people won't or can't. Yeah. So the boredom of excellence is an important lesson here, because it was the ongoing, consistent, perpetual performance technique of playing night after night after night. Just envision this. In the first 3 years of Twisted Sister, working 6 nights a week, 5 shows a night. That's 30 shows a week, 120 a month, 1,400 a year. So already you're at almost 6,000 after 3 years. Contrast that with a young band today who comes to me and goes, "Hey, JJ, come and see my band. How long you guys been together?" 2 years. "Oh, really? How many shows you done?" "Well, we've done a lot. We've done 50. I went, 50 shows? Wow, 50 shows, huh? They go, "Yeah, man. Come see the band." I said, "Well, bands usually suck till they hit 500. So when you get to 500, call me and I'll come and see you." And they go, "Well, we'll never get to 500. And I said, "Well, there's a good chance I'm never going to come and see your band." Okay. So I was at 500 after the first 2 months. And it's that repetition that hammers it. So it's tenacity, the TWISTED, tenacity, wisdom. I go through it in the book. Inspiration, S, stability, T for trust, E for excellence, D for discipline. Those are the rules that made us big. Doing those 7 things, which we did not know we were doing at the time we were doing it. It was only through the perspective of the fact that I started keeping a diary in 1974 when my mom died, and keeping that diary for years after year after year. And you go back and you read your mental state, you read what you did, what happened to you, how to confront it, how to overcome it. All of that stuff, all the tools that I used are in the book. And they're in the book, and I describe why it happened, how it happened, when it happened, and our reaction to what happened, and what our solution was. This is a blueprint for how to deal in business and in life. And that's what makes me so proud about the book.
The name of the book is Twisted Business. And in that, JJ shares his insights and the wisdom that he's accumulated in this very competitive business. What I like about it is that you can take these principles and apply them to whatever business that you're in. Not many people are trying to be a heavy metal band, but if you can take those principles and those tips and that wisdom and apply them to your business, to your life, whatever you're trying to accomplish, you're definitely going to be one step ahead of the competition. And wow, you don't have to take 50 years to learn these lessons the hard way. And speaking of learning things the hard way, we would always like to be able to say once you got to number 1, you stayed there and you lived happily ever after. But that's hard. It's hard to stay at the top of the heap once you've made it, and maybe things beyond your control come in. But at some point, you plummeted from number 1. You went down to a place where there were some personal issues in the band. You got to a place where you didn't know where the rent was coming from more than once. And you talk about this in the book, but what can you tell someone and offer them in terms of wisdom for reversing that bad stretch of luck, or when things are going really good and then things go down? Sometimes it's harder to come back than it is to get there in the first place. What would you say to someone in that situation?
Well, most artists, most people, especially the younger you are, don't understand that fame is not owned, it's rented. That's an important distinction. You're never famous forever. It just doesn't happen. Okay, the Beatles, great. Thank you. There's 800,000 bands. You gave me the one, all right, or 2. Big deal. Fact is, you don't own it, you rent it, number 1. So you need to understand that. Secondly, the ability to rebound after catastrophic failures is really one of the hallmarks of my life and the book, because I talk about the kind of issues that confront any business. If a business is an airplane and you want stability, right? Because, stability, you want clear air, right? You just want to get to the location. But, there's turbulence. So I look at turbulence in business and I go, okay, well, there's a challenge. What's the challenge? Well, there may be headwinds. That's a challenge, and you'll feel some movement. Oh, there may be a crisis. What's that? Oh, well, there's really, you're flying into bad weather conditions. The plane's really moving up and down. And then there's catastrophe where the pilot almost loses, control and the plane goes. So understanding the difference in challenges, crises, and catastrophes is really important. Confronting them is important. Being realistic about it is important. I mean, being realistic in business is the toughest thing because we all live in some sort of crazy fantasy. I tell you this, if you drink and you do drugs, that fantasy will never clear up in front of your head. You need to be clear-eyed. You need to confront yourself. And you know what? In the early days of the band, when our demos were rejected, we didn't go, screw you, you guys are stupid, you don't know what you're doing. They were right. Just because someone says you suck doesn't mean you don't suck. You could really suck.
Maybe you do, yeah.
And maybe you do suck. And if you suck, pay attention and learn from being sucky. Okay? So we went through a process of dealing with these traumas, and with the hindsight of 15 years of diaries, it was a pattern that happened over and over again. So we would, let's say, send out a demo, right? And it would just, and we would just be like excoriated by the label, and we would be just destroyed over it, right? So the first thing we do is we mourned this. You kind of mourn it. You got to just get over it quick, but you mourn it. Then you reflect on the comments. Maybe they're right. Maybe this, maybe that. Okay. Then you retool, and then you reapply the retooling. And that process, reflection, the mourning, the reflection, the retooling, the reapplication became a consistent framework for the band. And we kept doing it over and over and over and over and over again until the scene finally caught up with us. So how were we able to stay together through all this? We had a stable band. We had a stable business model. We always had a salary because we were able to make enough money to maintain a certain state of mind to be able to continue on with this. But it became more challenging as time went on. I go into depth in the book about how we dealt with each one of these setbacks. I mean, it got so bad. The rejections got so bad that one time when we were told that a record label was flying in from England to see us, they were definitely going to sign us. My attitude was, well, what's going to happen is the plane will blow up over the Atlantic with the executive in it. But if he does land, he'll die in a car crash on the way to the venue. But if he makes it to the venue, the PA will fall on us and kill us anyway, so it won't really matter. That's how we looked at it. So the guy actually lands, gets on time, drives up to Poughkeepsie. We do the show. It's great. He walks in the dressing room. He says, "Oh my God, I'm going to sign you. This is the most amazing show." He walks out. We say nothing. D goes, $5 says he dies in a car crash back to the airport. $100 says he dies in a plane crash going back to the UK. This is how bad it got.
Yeah.
So he goes back to the UK, and what happens about a month after it? The worst snowstorm in the history of England happens and wipes out his office. Okay? True story. Wipes out his office, right? So we're thinking, there you go, perfect example. He's never going to make. Well, anyway, the contract finally gets negotiated, and we get the contract, and I go pick up the contract at Kennedy Airport, and the band meets in a centrally located area in Queens. We're about to sign the contract, and on the day we're about to sign this contract with a English-based record label, the front page in the Daily News says England goes to war in the Falkland Islands on that day. And I said, guess what? There will be no natural resources to print our record because they're going to war. I went, that's just great. Perfect. So bottom line is we do the record. It's Under the Blade. We make the record, and this is so great. We have a record coming out, We advertise, this is our last show in Long Island. Thank you for 9-10 years of support. We're gone. We're out of here. But thank you so much. And I get a call from my lawyer. You sitting down? Yeah. The company went bankrupt. And so we never made it to England for the tour. So I go into depth in the book, and how we dealt with that setback to eventually get signed by Atlantic is a story in the book. So trying to process all that when you're high or on coke and going through all the fake, emotional Sturm und Drang that you go through is impossible. But because I had a bunch of guys who were straight, hard workers, we just kind of hunkered down and came up with a solution. I cannot emphasize enough how drugs and alcohol really confuse the issue and do not do you any favors in solving anything. So this doesn't come from a religious fanaticism. This doesn't come from I don't want to, I'm not a lecturer and I'm not your father, but I am someone who has really been through a lot and has seen the ins and outs of all of it. And this has been my experience. This is what I see. This is how we figured it out. And hopefully you'll see it and you'll read about it and you'll go, wow, that makes perfect sense.
I've been speaking with J.J. French. He is one of the founding members of Twisted Sister, the internationally renowned heavy metal band. Nearly 50 years ago, he since then has amassed 37 gold and platinum albums as a musician, manager, producer, and executive producer, while having performed over 9,000 shows in 40 countries, selling 20 million records around the world. Now, he's not just a rock star, but JJ is also a business leader. And together with Steve Farber, he has written his new bizoir, combination business advice and strategy, combined with his personal memoir. The name of the book is Twisted Business, and you can get that at Amazon. And I encourage you to do so and check out this wisdom and the tips. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, what we have talked about today. But very exciting. And you can take these principles, apply them to your life and to your business in true Rebelpreneur fashion, and just learn from one of the best and one of the nicest guys in the business, I have to say. So if you want to connect with JJ, you can do so at his website, jjfrench.com. And before I let you go, I want to plug your podcast. You've got a new podcast out, JJ. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's called the JJ French Connection Beyond the Music. I have a lot of great guests. I got business people, I got musicians, I have authors, writers, actors. I've had Michael Imperioli, I've had Nuno Betancourt, I've had Rob Halford, I've had movie directors, I've had Frank Marshall, who's one of the most famous director-producers in Hollywood. I've had Steve Binder, who is a legendary TV producer, director. I've had just a great cross-section of people involved in my hobby. You know, I'm a high-end audio guy, so I have plenty of high-end audio guys on, guitar collectors, you name it. And it's just fascinating to have a show. As my daughter said to me, Dad, if you have a podcast and you can make money talking, you're going to be the richest person on earth, is really what my daughter's quote was. To which I said, well, if you can get paid using a cell phone, you will be the richest person on earth, or the second richest person on earth. But so I have the podcast, and of course I write for several magazines. And here's another email. It's Ask JJ, which is just AskJJay, AskJJTS.com. You can also email me there. You can listen to my podcasts. They're on Apple Tunes and on Spotify and on Podcast One. And of course the book, and I do motivational speaking, and I write for Copper, which is an online audio magazine, and Goldmine. I write a Beatle column. Why? Because I'm a Beatleologist. And why am I a Beatleologist? Well, number one, I grew up with the Beatles, so they were at the core of my listening from the age of 12 to 20. And I've read every book written about it, and I know far too much than I should, much to the chagrin of my wife, who has to hear me talk nothing but Beatles, and she's not a Beatle fan, so that really makes it even more difficult. But my friends get together. Mike Portnoy, for example, our drummer, is a huge Beatle fan, so we can just talk Beatles, except that the one difference between me and the guys who write the books that I read, I don't need to know that Paul said to George at 3:14 in the afternoon on January 6th, as they're walking across Abbey Road, that your shoe's untied. I don't need to know that much minutia. But I know way more than I need to know. But I love the Beatles, and I'm a big fan. I'm also a blues guitar fan. I listen to blues all the time. That's my favorite music. Love it to death. I can listen to blues all day. It's my classical music. And so it makes me happy. Right now on my turntable is a Sonny Boy Williamson album, as a matter of fact.
Wonderful. A man of many talents and of much wisdom, JJ French. Thank you so much for being on Rebelpreneur Radio. I really enjoyed it.
Ralph, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You've been listening to Rebelpreneur Radio with Ralph Brogden. Download the show notes and much more at rebelpreneur.com.